Hello, it's Katie. So today I'm going to show you how to create this crocheted effect, which is often called a seafoam effect as well. So it's lots and lots of crocheted nuggets all together, and how to attach the clasp. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to make the whole necklace again. I'm going to show you how to make a bracelet version, but I am going to tell you the dimensions that you would need to make the necklace. So for the necklace I used 1.5 meters of the Apatite nuggets that are in this kit. So I think it's around about 2.5 meters altogether, so you need to leave about 1 meter left onto your original strand. So what you need to do is thread those onto your monofilament, which I will show you in a second. And once you have crocheted them, which I will show you that in a second, you will end up with around about 14 meters of crochet. Don't worry, it's not as difficult as it sounds. So to do the necklace design, to get this nice fullness, you're going to need 1.5 meters of your Apatite strand, and you're going to pop that onto your monofilament reel to start with. So I'm just going to move this out of the way and show you how to get started and then how to put it all together. So to make the bracelet, I've pre-threaded onto my reel. Do not cut the monofilament, you will need lots and lots of this monofilament, so thread it directly onto the reel. So this is still attached here, and I've threaded, it's around about 50 centimeters for the bracelet. What we need to do is make a slip knot. So what we want to do is kind of fold this over. I'm leaving a little bit of a tail, so I've got about 4 or 5 inches. I'm going to fold this over, and then with the working side I'm going to push that up through, then grab that loop that I've pushed through and pull that, and that's going to give me that kind of slip knot that's going to move. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to crocheting. So the crochet hook that I'm using, this is actually a 3.75, but sort of anything between kind of this and up to a 5mm is fine, because you want it to be quite loopy. So I'm going to just tighten that loop around my crochet hook, around this part of it, because that's the size that we're wanting. And I'm going to just do a few chains just to start with. So what I do is I hook this under this finger here and then here. So I've got my thread kind of in between here. So it's just really basic crochet. So the first few are always a little bit awkward because you haven't really got anything to hold, but what you want to do is kind of hold that knot there, that first knot. So what we're going to do is we pick up our thread, so it's on my hook, we pick up our thread, turn and then pull through that loop. Then we pick up our thread, turn and pull through. So we're just creating a chain. So just so that I can get away from that knot and have a little bit to kind of hold on to, I'm just going to do 7 or 8 stitches just with no beads on at all. So I've got that beginning part of my chain there, you can see that. So once I've got to this stage, it's kind of adding a few beads at a time. So what I tend to do is drop a few down so I can keep those kind of inside of my hand, and then I can drop one down at a time. So you want to work close to your work. So have this, you want this thread underneath nice and loose, and then be able to have a little bit of tension in this little bit here. So we drop a bead down and we do the same thing. So we're just ignoring that bead basically, and then we're going to come through, around and come through. So thread over and come through, thread over and come through, and you're going to do about 3 or 4 stitches and then drop another bead down. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then drop another bead down. So sometimes 2 might go down, but if you want to add 2, add 2, but don't do the 2 every time, because we want to create this very long length. So I've worked up a little bit of my crochet already, so we're just doing this really simple chain stitch, adding beads every 3 or 4 stitches, and now kind of it's starting to get a little bit tangled together. So what we need to do is just organize this so that it's going to stay nice. Now what I did is, my tip is to use the bag that your threading materials came in. So taking that bag, I'm just going to pop this around, so empty the bag first obviously, and then pop this around, and then I'm just going to start winding this around, just catching that tail, and as you go you're just going to wind each time. So you're going to work up to that, and this bag can just stay on your beading mat, and then you can continue. So now we've got that sorted, organised, so that tip to keep these organised, all I need to do is crochet through all of the rest of my nuggets, and I will meet you back when we're ready to start putting our bracelet together. So all of my crochet is done now, so that's all wrapped around there and ready to go, and I just need to do one little bit more of preparation before we put all of this together. So I'm using one of our cone tools, so I know we've got a few different ones, so this is kind of a stubby length one, and I'm just using some 1mm wire. Now the wire's not in the kit, but most people have quite a lot of wire. So what we do is we put it through just a little bit, and then we start winding, but we want to leave a little loop. So leaving that little loop just on the end there, so here. So, and that's just going to give us somewhere to cut our wire. And then all we do is keep winding this around. So wind, wind, wind. I'm just going to do it with my other hand because that's a little bit easier. So we don't want it too big because it's a bracelet, so I'm going to go to about there, so it's not all the way to the bottom. We're not doing any fancy swirls or anything on this because I want it to sit quite neat, so I'm going to cut that quite short into there. And then to get it off here, this is why we cut the wire. So the wire's coming through here, and I'm just going to cut that wire there, and then this straight bit that went through should just come out like so. So we've got our little cone ready to be used like so. And then just before we start this little section, the top of the cone, so the most narrow part of the cone, you just need to kind of grab it with the end of your pliers and pull it more towards the inside like so. So it's going to look a little bit strange at the top, but that's going to stop any sort of end being able to scratch you. We'll deal with the other end when we've got our bracelet put together. So I've got everything in place here, everything that I need in front of me. I've got my board. If you're just using a macrame board, just pop something like maybe T-pins or something and just make them that 6 inches apart. So I've got one pin here. It's a bit hard to see it on there. I do it that way, you can see that pin there. So I've got them 6 inches apart, and then I've got to add my clasp. Now that it will bunch up a little bit, but we kind of want it to stretch around the wrist a little bit so that it forms its shape. When it's kind of on its own laid down, it's probably not going to look bracelet sort of like at all, but it will do once it's warm. So the other things that I've got ready are, I've got all my beads that I've crocheted, and then I've got a clasp from the kit, the beautiful magnetic clasp. I've got 2 eye pins from the kit. I've got those 2 little cones that I just made for the ends, and also I've got 2 of the quartz beads from the kit also ready to finish off. And the only other thing that I need is a little bit of glue. So I'm using an E6000 glue, but any sort of glue just to finish off. It's going to be on the inside, nobody's going to see it, so any sort of clear glue will do fine, especially if it's got a little bit of flexibility to it as well. So all we're going to do now is we're going to start wrapping this around. Now I don't want to do it too tight, just want to start wrapping these around, and every time I wrap around I want to come through on a loop. So I've got a loop there, and then I'm going to put it through one of the loops on this one. So when I say loop, it's one of these crocheted stitches that we're bringing it through. So backwards and forwards through a crocheted loop. So it's going to take a while, so I'm just going to skip ahead just a few spaces just so that we've got to the end of this backwards and forwards stringing this, and then I'll show you how we put it all together at the very end. So that's actually just worked out right, so I've finished just on here. Now if you find you're kind of finishing and you're halfway down a strand, unravel it all and just crochet yourself a little bit more. As you can see, I actually left that thread on, so don't cut that thread off until you get to this stage. So I'm just going to cut that thread, but I've cut it quite a way down because I've still got to finish that end off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move these little grippy bits out of the way. And I'm going to start on this end just because it's easy, because we don't have to finish that end, and open it up nice and wide. Now what I want to do is take one of these off at a time and pop that onto that loop. So I'm going to take that one off and pop that in there. It's a little, okay, so all of those are now onto the eye pin, and now I just need to close that, closing that up, and then just taking your time just to make sure everything's finished really nicely. So all of those pieces are now in there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put my cone on. Okay, so once I've got that eye pin in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some glue right on the end of that eye pin. So it can be quite a decent amount of glue, not too much that it's going to leak out anything or anything, but so that we've actually covered the end of the eye pin, and then I can pop my little cone over the top of that, and any gemstones will slip inside there beautifully. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up those quartz that I just had, those beautiful clear quartz, and pop one of those on the top there. So once you've popped your quartz bead on, you're just going to make a slight angle just using your pliers. So just from the bead, and just make that slight angle away from the bead, and then you're going to create a wrapped loop. So, but we want to add the clasp halfway through this. So we're going to pop our pliers in as close as possible to that little angle that we just made there, and then turn this loop all the way around in this direction, and then reposition our pliers and come across there. And then at this point we can just pop our clasp on. So I'm just popping it on, I haven't closed that loop up yet, and I'm just going to bring that through, and what you'll find is it will kind of click through into that little loop there, and then you can hold the loop you just made. Now it is magnetic, so it will like your pliers quite a lot, and then bring this tail of the eye pin around and bring that all the way back towards your bead. So I'm just turning that around and around until it kind of gets up nice and close to that bead, and I'm going to take that as far as I can go and then snip it off. So I'm just going to take my pliers and snip that off. Now just make sure, because your clasp is attaching to your pliers, that you don't snip the loop at the top there. So that's how we attach each of the ends. So I'm just going to finish off the other end. We do it exactly the same, apart from, I'll just go through this really quickly. The one that we have the length left at the end, we just need to pass that through the last loop, and that's all we do to finish it off, and it'll just create a little knot at the end there. So I'll see you again in 2 minutes with the finished piece. So finally, just to finish, what I'm going to do is remember the other end of the cone that we had. So just to make sure that this does not scratch anybody, I'm just going to tuck that towards the inside. So I've just turned that towards the inside there, and then the same at this side, like so, and turn that towards the inside. Now when you look at it, it's going to look like a really kind of small tiny bracelet, but don't forget it's got to kind of stretch a bit around your wrist, and that's going to give it that nice feel, so it's more like a cuff type around your wrist, but it's got that beautiful organic nature to it. So you will just have to stretch it very slightly to bring it round, but that's the beauty of having that magnetic clasp, and then you'll get this amazing bracelet that matches the necklace beautifully, and it's got all this texture to it, and it fits really, really comfortable against the wrist. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again very soon.